Shalom. It is your bipolar host with mommy issues, Keats Ross. And I'm here with the brilliant and beautiful Mary Joon, accompanying this little introduction on the P-Nanner. It is my esteemed pleasure to introduce our inaugural Colorado episode. Since we've relocated here in sunny Aspen country. And using this episode to present my conversation with the Occulture author, documentarian, cut-up conductor, Mr. Carl Abrahamsson. Those of you not familiar with this work, but may have listened to this podcast, may recall Carl being half of the international jet-setting, trans-dimensional wayfaring duo that is Trap Art, a metaphysical media enterprise fronted by him and recent PRAGMAGICK guest, Dr. Vanessa Sinclair. Carl, though, has been ever so present in the world of occulture. He literally wrote the book on it. And he's been a prominent fixture in both my artistic and magical whims, having been a frequent collaborator with the likes of Kenneth Anger, Genesis P. Orridge, and Anton motherfucking La Vey. Our talk couldn't have come at a better time, as these things usually do. All hail chaos, all hail synchronicity. As I've been struggling to assess the current state of occulture, or what, if any, my place in this whole charade might be. And Carl, like I said, literally wrote the book on it. His oeuvre, his body of work, and his inspirational intent is decades-long, fervent, and prolific. If there was ever an episode to address and court the need for a multifaceted creative life parallel to one's wayward spiritual path as a seeker, it's this one. And it is my esteemed pleasure to talk to somebody that cares so much about all the facets, about all the interests, and the intention about what they do in both camps. So, without further ado, weirdos and witches, slither hither. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Carl Abrahamsson. Take it away, Mary Joon. Haunt on. Carl Abrahamsson, so good to meet you finally. I feel like I have this parasocial kind of relationship with you through your work. So it's very cool to meet you finally.
Yeah, likewise. It's just amazing, actually, that technology allows for such a easy and smooth way of communicating, and that's why I'm very much in favor of all these things because of promotion, obviously, but also conversation and building new kinds of networks that would simply be kind of impossible if this technology weren't here. So I see this as a very, very good thing.
Yeah, and that kind of brings me to my first question, which is, it has a lot to do with Occulture, your book that came out a little over a year ago.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get what your state of the union is on what Occulture has been since the publication of that book and where you maybe think it's going.
Yeah, no, it's a question that I think about often.
Right.
Perhaps not daily, but when you are as you say, on social media, and you sort of keep up with what's going on, and it's not a matter of whether you want to see it, you will see it because of how the algorithms work and the sort of keywords and stuff like that. So what I can see happening is basically a kind of continuing trajectory of events, certainly in my life, that led up to the publication of the book. And of course, the book is not, it's maybe unique in the way that it puts things together, but these are much greater movements than my mere, intellectual capacity. And, just recently over these past days, I've seen stuff about the upcoming Occulture conference in Berlin. And there was, I think last weekend, there was something called the Trans States conference in Northampton that me and Vanessa were at, I think 3 years ago. So those are only two examples of things going on literally in the now. And they are not isolated occurrences. They're, these things happen all around the world. And as I've talked about before, it's a mix between the existence now of these, all kinds of weird topics under the umbrella of occulture within academia. So you have these highbrow conferences and loads of books being published about, not so much about like the history of religion or comparative religion. It has to do specifically with esoteric things that we could call magic or the occult. These are just terms, but so that kind of presence in the highbrow environment, and also on a grassroots level, because I don't think, for instance, that the Occulture Festival in Berlin is academically based. It's more like a grassroots thing.
Right.
So yeah, so it's wonderful. And me and Vanessa, we had our latest conference in northern Italy in late May, early June, and that's another example of a grassroots thing where we invite people from all these worlds, and they are all welcome to create this kind of, I don't know, new kind of egregore, which we hope will remain very, very open-minded, because that's a little bit of the challenge for the academic environment, that they have so much formalia. They have so many formal things that they have to adhere to. So that sort of decimates their potential of speculation.
Right.
And I'm very much in favor of speculation. Every empirical, breakthrough comes from speculation.
I agree. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that kind of brings into my next question, which was, about adversity and about how maybe there's a bunch of rhyme and reason between a lot of the occult renaissance that happened, in past eras. But
Mm-hmm.
it seems like this one is lacking somewhat of a um, adversarial degree with the social consciousness. And I was
Mm-hmm.
wondering if you noticed that, if that's like something think is lacking almost, because it seems like magic comes from desperation in a lot of ways.
Mm.
And it seems like with the advent of it being so easily reachable and community so easily made, maybe, I don't know what your observation is with that.
Yeah, I think here we come to the crux, or the sort of problem of definition. What is it? And I usually use this cliched thing. I think the occult is like hidden things, but that's historically apt and correct. But what is it today? It's
Right.
actually completely different thing. And so hence, I think we have lost the need for adversity, identifying with the adversary, like Satan in a way, or Lucifer. That's all fair and fine, but it almost, requires some kind of romantic notion,
Right.
also a historic romantic notion. So I don't think that this thing, adversity or an adversarial principle, is necessary for any kind of occult contemporary movement or groups or mind frame for that to thrive. Maybe it's actually surpassed that simplistic dualism. And I think that what we have today, with this kind of technology and the ability to reach a lot of people, and also the ability to be very, very creative with technology that wasn't accessible like a couple of decades ago. So I think we have a much more proactive potential, that the adversarial principle is kind of redundant.
Right.
Why would I feel the need to go into combat with evangelical Christians?
Right.
It's just a waste of time.
Yeah.
They're their own worst enemies. So in that sense, I think this is the best of all worlds, actually, because we can just be super creative. And if someone wants to engage in some kind of fisticuffs, why even bother? And
Yeah.
that goes within the occult or the occulture community too. Who gives a shit? Life is too short. We have the stuff that we feel that we need to be preoccupied with to fill us with joy and meaning and all these things. And that's usually the case with people who are very, actively looking for some kind of, cock measuring in a way, regardless of gender. It leads nowhere. People should just focus on being proactive. And again, as your podcast and concept is so, beautifully called, to be pragmagical about it, to use, pragmatism in this sense, because we are not confined, we are not, in debt to any kind of tradition or anything. It's like being inside a circus in a way. If we don't like this ride, we'll just move on to that ride, and eventually, when we come out of the thing, we will hopefully be satisfied and have had fun and experienced meaning. So, in that sense, I think we have left. I mean, everybody leaves history every second, but we, in this occultural or occult community, which doesn't exist, but as a concept, we have already left history behind, and there's no need for it, except for as like romantic fodder or inspiration.
Right.
But I think in terms of magical, technology, it's kind of redundant.
Yeah, it almost seems like it's moved to
Meaning,
more of an individuation process. Like
yeah,
the adversarial aspects are so by user, by participant. It doesn't need for this big group
yes,
think adversarial thing. And I wanted to get into that a little bit
mm,
with your time in Topi, the Temple of Psychic Youth.
mm-hmm,
How, as someone that has tried and is still trying to kind of formulate an art collective around magical practice and trying to get into that liminal space,
mm.
um, how how did you get such individualistic minded practitioners and artists to convene? How did you guys come together, and what were the pitfalls of that?
Mm. Uh, I think that first of all, everything in my recollection, my experiences within Topi and Topi Scan, the little Scandinavian thing, and then Topi
Right.
Europe, and all these things was based on a very genuine sense of uh, exploration, of course, but also honesty, and there was no pyramidal structure, no hierarchy in any traditional sense, and also everything was kind of a nice constructive feedback loop going on. The essential part of that kind of networking, you received something and you sent something back,
Mhm.
uh, and so that was already a culture of uh, encouraging postal services because this was before the internet, but that kind of flow of information already created a sense of trust. Then of course you had the magic of this, if you're thinking specifically about the sigilizing and creating sigils and sending them in, and that was today I think many young people are already kind of jaded on a superficial level because they
Right.
already know everything in their mind, meaning they have gone to Wikipedia and read about Austin Spare, and but that's not the same as actually working with the process. And the beauty of the sigilizing process for those like myself who are like willing to give it a try, because you could then get Spare either in like original editions that were very very expensive, or some anthologies that were sort of cheaply made but they had the textual information anyway. So that being activated in this community of very pleasant positive exploration and honesty. Also the regularity, meaning that on the 23rd or 2300 hours, etc., we did this thing more or less together or in parallel, regardless if we were in the US or in Sweden or in London or wherever. So there was that sense of community, and you didn't have to share it with anybody, but the concept as such, individuals doing something together, not to have a communal goal. That was the case in some instances, but for yourself to try this process of being so exposed and creatively experimental, not only for its own sake, but to create a change in the outside reality. And I think that many of those people, again, like myself, found that to be a very, not just like inspiring thing to do, but it did change things. And then you can come to this dichotomy: is it in my mind, or is it actually an outside reality? That's also kind of redundant question, because if it fills you with meaning because you see enough results out there, meaning I would like for this to happen, oh shit, it happened,
Right.
that's empiricism in its most valuable way. So I think that when that was already rolling, beginning with very few individuals in it, in the sort of inception of Topi, then that kind of inspiration that was radiating from the process and from these individuals, mainly via the art that they were producing, like in music or films or writing, it was kind of an infectious environment in the best possible way. It was an inspiring environment, and it
Still
basically
is.
came from this core experimentation. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It's still there, and there could be many, rebootings, or people could work with it on their own. It's interesting when things are, in the past, they have a tendency to become mythologized, and
Right.
I very much look forward to the documentary that's being made about Topi, because that will give people, young people specifically, very substantial fodder about what it was about, so that they can go beyond, perhaps a bit, again, romantic mythologizing, and see to who were these people and what did they actually do, and of course, why is it so inspiring?
Right. It seems like the threadbare has always been intent. And I remember you you've spoke before about how each piece of art that you make, there has to be a reason for it.
Yeah,
And I was hoping you could
absolutely.
expand on that, because I absolutely agree with that.
Mm. Yeah, no, I think that I come from a background, both, personally and socially and stuff like that, which is, you could say, cultured. My mother worked at an art gallery for like 40 years, and my father was interested in music, and, so I've grown up with a lot of sort of neurotic artist types. And what's changed now over the past decades is, of course, that it is no longer about uh, catering to or allowing a fairly neurotic person to be creative and express this neurosis. That's really what makes for interesting art. Now we've also had the infusion of the postmodern concept of, having to explain what you're doing, and seeing too that it fits within these prefab, politically correct models, and all this absolute bullshit that and it's so off turning. I can hardly go to a contemporary gallery or a museum because it's so, basically, it turns me off. So if you reason like that, and you're also interested in magic and art in a historic sense, then you get to this sort of initial primordial times, when people started being creative. Why were they creative? They were trying to appease or diminish their own fear, because they didn't understand all of, what the universe was about, or even their close environment, what that was about. And, the sun disappears, or there are threats in the forests, and we need to, hunt a few more things. So they started creating art in a way to bring this forth to the outside reality. So you see the connection with ritual, and with magical thinking, and with desire, and also survival. That's a very important concept. Today, there's like nothing of that. It's all superficial, it's all intellectual, it's all left brain in a way, at least when it comes to the presentation. The formal aspects, meaning, how something is designed, is sometimes more important than the idea. And I think that that's wrong. Of course, I can't say that to an artist who is totally convinced that he or she is an artist and has gone to art school and all these things, and that's not my function. I don't really want to be involved with other people and be, involved in this kind of discourse either. However, when it comes to my own creativity, and also I know that's true for Vanessa and for many other people, it's like the formal aspects are very, very secondary. They are completely subservient to the content, to the core of signal. I like this thing with
Right.
signal and noise.
Yeah.
Today's contemporary art is filled with noise. It's like nothing. Where is the signal? And we want to hone in and present as much signal as possible, meaning what do we want to see happen in the outside world? Let's present that in a creative form, and voila, that's art for us. And that's basically what we're doing in many different forms. Could be traditional forms like making music or writing, but it could also be like experimental things like, the cut-ups and cutting things up and putting them together randomly and
Right.
seeing what's there. But always, even in the most frenzied experimental joy, to have a core desire or will in there, to make it talismanic.
Right. To charge it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe then postmodernism is the adversity we- that we all
Yeah, could
share.
be. But even that, yeah, no, absolutely. That could be one thing, saying that, what is this crap? But
Right.
then again, it's much more constructive to just leave it behind and let these goofies, you know, live in their little dream world, which is just ultimately filled with frustration. Because when I know so many young artists who, go to art school and they're so happy about being there, and maybe it's a good art school or a well-renowned art school, but when they come out of that experience, they're in debt, student loan debt, and they have to think about things like sustenance, and they will become victims of this shark infested environment, which is the art world, where you have reviewers, and you have gallery people, and you have people who buy and sell your art. And that's a very tricky thing, because, for instance, if someone actually has a successful show and make money off of that, do you think they will then go the direction of further experimentalism and possible no sales, or will they stick to the groove that's already there? I would say that 90% would stick with a comfortable groove of just presenting more of the same. and
Right.
and you could then argue, well, that's magical then, because they want to make money, sure, but they could equally well be doing that by selling socks or working as an accountant.
Right.
So there's no creative challenge
Yeah.
involved, and I think there needs to be.
It almost seems like pretension is such a bad word, or being
Hmm.
pretentious is such a scoffed at, terrible attribute for an artist, but or even maybe a magician. But it seems
Hmm.
like that is a major thing that we're losing, especially in modern
Yeah,
art. It seems a little bit too laissez-faire, kind of art for art's sake. And there needs to be more
yeah,
attention, maybe a little more pretension.
yeah, or simply ambition in that
Right.
sense. Because I say pretentiousness is sort of misguided ambition in a way, because
Hmm.
most of these people have a great zest and gusto, and great energy in their, they invest a lot in their work and life. But sometimes when they can't really uh, separate from the art, and they try to express their genuine artistic process with intellectual discourse, then it becomes sort of, it misses the goal in a way. And I
Right.
think we could blame this also on our culture, in a sense, because we're so accustomed and now programmed even to be visible. We have to be visible on social media, and everything we do, whether it's like having lunch or clipping our toenails, somehow needs to be out there. And that is a strange culture, but I think it also hinders people to take a minute and take a moment off and just go into a more meditative state and say that, where am I heading with this specific piece of work, like a sculpture or something creative? And it's not necessary to flaunt it at all.
Right.
Even, there are many people, many artists who are not on Twitter. They have successful careers anyway, so it's not really necessary from the market's point of view. It's a kind of a program that we have received over this past decade, that makes for this incredibly narcissistic and flaunting culture. But it's
Right.
not necessary to the creative process in itself. It could be good as additional marketing. That's how I look at it.
There's some, like new thought type aspects to that too. Almost creating accountability for yourself by posting and playing this fake it till you make it thing. So with that, there may be some good that can come from that. But yeah, it seems like a very disgruntled way to share in the process of creating.
Yeah, it becomes it's a kind of a shallow thing.
Right.
And but also one can never argue. I mean, there are incredible success stories, and I feel active enough, both me and Vanessa, we try to inform about what's going on, not like every single aspect of every single movement, but at least keep people in the loop, because we are producing a lot of different things. So of course we want people to be aware of that. So I see that's more like an informational flaunting. But
Hmm.
then of course you have an entire culture on a higher level, or if you maybe it's a lower level, but I mean financially more successful level, like anything from the Kardashians or MTV or this thing where it's nothing. It's a presentation of absolute nothing, and that's highly lucrative, because the representatives of nothing can market themselves in many different kinds of environments in which you have a financial revenue coming in. And it's kind of remarkable, because it's never been like that. People used to be somebody, and then you could have a glamour, but now the glamour in itself comes from mere visibility and frequency. And it's a weird thing, but it's also something to be looked at from a magical level. We of course don't need to or couldn't adapt to being nothing, since we are something.
Right.
But the strange thing is that if this is a mere causal process, like you do the Twitter thing and then you do this and you sort of analyze it from an almost scientific behavioral point of view, then of course you could have a greater outreach, and that could be good for the something that you have. So that's where I am at now. I'm sort of ambivalent in a way, but I'm trying to learn more and more about how it could be integrated, but only in the promotion,
Right.
never in the artistic or creative process in itself, because that's something that's in here. It's like when it comes out as writing, yes, there is an intellectual filtering, but it's not intellectual for the sake of being in an environment that sort of requires it, because that would be like prostitution in a way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you
And no
and
offense to prostitutes.
right. I was just gonna say, you and your wife, Vanessa Sinclair. I am
Yeah.
just so astounded by the level of productivity and insight and cross-medium creation. And I wanted to get a little
Mm.
glimpse into what a day is like in your guys' creative lives.
Yeah. It's we try to be structured in the sense that we're early birds, and we get up and have breakfast, and then we both work on things that requires mental presence and intellectual strength in a way. So we usually write in the mornings up until lunch, work on actual writing, not like correspondence, but just creative writing. I mean, we're both working on new books, and that's required. It's very hard to write a book, because I know that some people can just sit in a coffee shop and right away. I can't do that, and so we try to stay very focused in the first half of the day, and then of course lunch, and then I usually drift into administration of life and business and creative projects, and then in the evenings I usually drift into a different kind of creativity, which could be, for instance, music or movie making, like editing films and working with the film projects,
Right.
because it's just a different kind of energy that's required. And then Vanessa, of course, works as a psychoanalyst, so she has patients that requires also a different kind of presence from her. So ideally, this is how we structure our days. What usually disturbs that is the traveling. We travel a lot, and that is sometimes I wouldn't say counterproductive because it leads to new kinds of creativity, but it's hard to maintain that strict, rigid workflow that we both love. So yeah, that's just our life filled with those kinds of challenges. But essentially, we cooperate even on the things which are our own. Like, Vanessa helps me with stuff and I help her with stuff. And then we also work on the things that we have together, like, the music and the cut-ups and some of the films. So it's just a very interesting life. And I mean, I'm very happy about having found someone that I don't feel a need, I don't feel a need that I have to explain anything. It's just all out there in the open. And we look at things like, everything is potentially creative, and I love where things become should I put wow, that's someone calling me, sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
How everything could be potentially creative in that sense. And I think these films, or I would call them projects, that we have been working on these past year or years, is a very interesting thing, where we could have like a text, whether it's something that I have written or someone else, or we have various like source text. Then Vanessa cuts them up and records herself reading them. I then put those readings to music, so we have like an album. And then we turn that album into a film using the same kind of, cut up or free flowing experimental attitude. And then you have a film with that stuff. And like recently, for the most recent one called Mementeros, which is kind of, erotic, we had a show in Zurich, meaning an exhibition based on screenshots from the film that Vanessa then added further stuff onto, so they become like original artworks. So I like that constant flow of things, which is kind of limitless, without boundaries. And again, working with these things, it's very, very stimulating. We have sometimes a hard time going to bed because there's so much to do and stuff like that. But it's a very rewarding life on many levels.
It sounds like it. Yeah. I was wondering too, you talked about your process a little bit just then, but what are some of the magical practices you guys kind of employ behind the art? Because one of my biggest interests is that confluence between the artistic process and ritual or magical practice, pragmagic in that way. And I was wondering if you could share some of you guys' different techniques or magical practices.
Yeah, I think without becoming like too specific,
Right.
because I sometimes feel that can actually be counterproductive when you want to inspire someone, because then it becomes like a little, not a cult, but it becomes too specific. And I, for one, and that's like an inheritance from the Topi days, is I would only encourage people to be very pragmatic, pragmatic, and then also work with creativity, because this is important. Many people think that, okay, to be a creative, you have to be some kind of artist, and or have the vocation or the desire to be, to be an artist. But I don't think that's the case at all. I would just very, on a general level, recommend people to be creative, regardless if they have any, talent or anything, because these things, and what is it? It could be like writing, could be like making collages, or making music, or cut-ups, or painting even, although you perhaps can't paint. That's besides the point. The main thing is to make an external representation of something you have on the inside, because that's basically how you define, like, the magical cave art, the first poetry, the first songs, even people dancing for a specific purpose. It's an symbolic representation in an exteriorized form. That really sums up magic in a way. So if you imbue that externalization with intent, that's magic for you.
Right.
And the reason why I think the creative processes work so well is because they're not structured according to our left brain rational way of thinking. And that, for me, in my experience, is one key why it works. Because if you're strictly rational, you are thinking in a causal way. You need a cause that leads to an effect, and that's fair and fine for existing in the causal reality. But magic has to do with the subconscious. It has to do with irrationality. It has to do with specific, right brain things, and the intuitive usage of these creative components. And I mean, collaging is a great way of being involved with that, because you have source material that may come from stuff that you've chosen rationally, but then when you cut it up and you you affix these parts in a new way, perhaps using random, let them fall where they may, I don't know, and then you put it together to create some kind of aesthetic thing. That's remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
And here we come to these complex things like faith, for instance. I have faith in this process. I know it works because I have experience of that. So I invest more into it because it's a method that works. Meaning, these things that I do, whether it's like uh, recording one of my texts or my poems and setting that to music, then it becomes more than poetry and music. It becomes, for instance, a declaration of intent, or a curse, or something that's more under the magical, specifically magical umbrella. Uh, and I think that the main thing how you learn these things is how it works for you. So you simply have to do it. I mean, it's not rocket science to have a pair of scissors and some old magazines and making a collage and then thinking, what do I want to imbue in this specific thing? Because it's my aesthetics, my choice of choosing this picture and this picture, and I could discard that picture as being irrelevant for this working. So you just have to work with it. And the expression that's dearest to my self is, of course, writing. You could do a lot of things simply by writing. You don't even have to cut it up. I mean, if someone is somewhat well versed into the craft of writing, take a love letter, for instance. A
Mm-hmm.
well-written love letter is a magical ritual because it will hopefully get you the result of uh, getting a sort of some kind of love back for that. But then, of course, you could also delve into more irrational things where you use text you've written and you cut them up, as we often do, and see what, as Burroughs said, what they actually mean. What do I mean by writing in this way? And that
So
process
yeah.
opens up for, yeah, go
Oh, I
ahead.
was just gonna say, yeah, there's this constant thread between a lot of the guests I have and talking this very question, and there's divination and randomness in a way, and it's I've heard it
Mhm.
used to get people out of writing holes. I've heard it used to for everything from advice. It's divination. You're using just the random.
Yeah,
You're organizing chaos in a way, and so I've always really
yeah.
appreciated that.
Mm. No, it's absolutely super important, and I think that one shouldn't look at it as some kind of pseudo religious thing either. I know so many people who work at it from a like strictly Burroughsian
Right.
point of view, and you can't edit and you can't cut off things, but of course you can. I mean,
Sure.
it's not him running the show from from beyond. It's how we work with these things, and I mean, I have a recent experience of this is that I'm wrapping up my second novel right now. So, and I didn't feel a need to include a cut up, but there was one section where there's a kind of a supernatural dreamlike state, and there was a kind of transmission to the protagonist. And there, I picked some things and I cut them up and made a sort of semi-edited version, and that fit in so well. And that in itself took the narrative onto a different direction than I had originally intended. So as a creative tool in itself, it's remarkable. And as we know, for simpler texts like lyrics and poetry, I mean, Bowie used a lot of cut-ups, and his lyrics are really um, catchy, and both in the pop sense, but there's also something there that draws you in, and it creates a kind of an irrational glamour. You know, what the hell
Right.
is he singing about, and why do I like it so much? You know,
Yeah.
it's a skill. You can hone those qualities and your creative capacity when it comes to that. But it's when you get the hang of it, then you should just definitely use it in every possible way.
I like that, not being dogmatic about any kind of process whatsoever. It kind of goes back into
No.
your, one thing I've always took from you and what I've really liked about what your thoughts were in this whole charade of life is that you shouldn't be
Hmm.
conscripted to one influence, and you've always been big on individuation and carving out your own process, taking from many different things, almost like cutting up influences
Hmm.
in a way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that that's also something that is interesting because I've been fortunate in the sense that I headed out into the world, and I was always a networker, and that meant a lot to me. So even before I became interested in hocus pocus and sort of started networking about magical things and being involved in actual groups or orders, I was already doing the same kind of thing but with music, because I was always uh, I'm addicted to producing printed matter. So I had a fanzine which was all about music, garage rock and B movies and that kind of culture. So I met a lot of people that I looked up to, like stars, and I thought they would never take 15 minutes to stick around with me and answer some questions for the fanzine. But my experience was actually the opposite, that most people who are, good people who make good things are very accommodating. And that might not even be for the sake of PR, because, does it really matter if some fanzine with a circulation of 500 copies write about your record? I don't know. But, that opened up a kind of a pattern in my mind that I then applied on my then, you know, growing, increasing interest in things hocus pocus, and that led me into, meeting Genesis, of course, and La Vey and Kenneth Anger early on, and that meant a lot to me. Like, it's a fuel that I'm still feeding off on, and with Jen, for instance, it's a still active friendship, and we're still working on things to this day. I mean, it was only a couple of months ago when our new record together came out. So
Right.
it's never really ended. It just keeps fluctuating. And in that sense, what I want to get to was that you can, of course, find inspiration wherever. You have your favorite writers or your favorite bands, and then if you feel a need to, then you can, stretch out a hand to that environment and see if it's more productive or could be counterproductive to actually be in the proximity of those people who created it. Sometimes I'm sure it doesn't work so well, but it doesn't need to be that kind of super glamorous star thing. It could just be people that really inspire you. Try to figure out and question, why is it that he or she inspires me so much? And those things that you find out will be things about yourself, not about those people. And then, of course, that could be food for thought, and little, bricks in the building of your greater house, in a way.
Right. Pillars and building a big structure. Yeah, I totally get that. I mean, the reason why I
Yeah.
started this podcast was for this very reason. So I really appreciate you being accommodating to me.
Hmm.
And you're passing it
Yeah, no,
along,
that's
so I
that's
appreciate
just but that yeah, that's the beauty of it. And that's exactly how it works, and it's exactly how it should work. It's just and here we come into other, things too, like holistic thought or some kind of psychedelic culture, where it's just everything just morphs along, and
it.
there's nothing that anybody could do to stop it ever, because it's just like you and I are we are currently hosted by these two bodies that we have, and we're communicating with each other, and we can understand each other, but it also affects other people. So it's just this steady stream that it comes from somewhere, and it's surely going somewhere. It's
Right.
beyond our control. So all we can do is like we can pseudo control the moment and give as much signal as possible, and that's a great thing, I think.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I meant. And as we're winding down, I had just like a personal question for someone such as
Hmm.
yourself that has worked with the likes of Ken Anger and Anton La Vey and Genesis P. Orridge. What are you finding are the like thread between all of you guys as thinkers or luminaries within this realm? What are some attributes you guys all share?
Hmm. I would say that's a kind of an easy thing to answer, because all these people may be different. They have
Right.
different traits and different, characteristics, but it's the persistence. And I don't really mean that in some kind of, peppy American way, never give up and be the best you can be, and all these sort of slogans. But persistence is very important. And the thing is that I think many people trip or stumble on the fact that they can't reach where they want to be immediately. It's also part of our culture, unfortunately, which is credit based. And I've written about that too. It's like uh, it works best in a magical economy that you work and you create things and then you sell it on a symbolic level, rather than getting it all at once and then having to pay it off. That works for a regular economy too. It's kind of unhealthy. So I think that persistence, where you don't look too much to the ultimate goal, because that may be an illusion, and also you change in life, so that your vision and your goals may change. But the main thing is to be true to yourself and have that persistence that this may not be the right path, but I'm sure as hell going to stay on it and see what comes out of it. So there you have the sense of experimentation, of audacity, and of basically trusting yourself and your intuition. Because when we grow up, as we all know, it's so easy to fall into these prefabricated traps, or settings or grooves that other people have created for us. And it's not that they're evil, they're just part of perhaps a non-individuated environment where people don't even think about these things because it's too painful or too advanced in a way. So I think that trust yourself, and then you work with yourself, and you will find out, of course, eventually, if you're true to yourself, what you like to do, what you don't like to do. And sometimes a simple dualistic analysis like that is all it takes to get you started. And then there will be a lot of magic, because when you're on your way, you have these things like, Jungian synchronicities, and
Right.
that's like evidence for me. Synchronicities are evidence.
Hmm.
And you meet people that you never thought that you would ever meet, but you do. Life can be a wonderful magical miracle, but the outside world isn't going to impose that on you. It will come from you and towards the outside.
Well, Carl, I really appreciate this talk. What's on the horizon? What's coming up?
The horizon is so filled with things
Right.
I can hardly see it. It's I'm working on my novel, like I said. That's the thing that brings me the most joy of all. That kind of consecutive writing, and writing fiction specifically. So that's going to be fun. That it will hopefully be something that comes out next year then. And then the documentary about Anton La Vey,
Mhm.
which is also very close to being finished. So that will actually be out
Congrats.
later this year. The first screening is, thank you, it's November 21st, and it's the biggest film I've ever made so far. So it's been a while in the making, but it'll be interesting, because it's sort of I place higher demands on myself in terms of quality, and this is also something I respect La Vey so much that I really want to make a film that he could feel proud of too. That I make, what do you call it? I present him in a just way, do him justice, make him justice, because it's so easy for these people who are, public media figures to be I don't know, portrayed in a very, very bad way. And I
Right.
mean, I know that he figured in American Horror Story, I think, and I haven't even watched that, and I have no intention of watching that. But it's so easy to fall into that trap. And I just want to present him as my experience of him was very, very creative, very generous, and it has nothing to do with the hocus pocus or the Satanism or the magic in itself. It has to do with that person's transmission, not only towards me but also to other people who knew him during this his last decade. So it's going to be more of a personal film. And then of course me and Vanessa, we're just rocking and rolling,
Jet setting.
producing new stuff, new music, and writing. Yeah, jet setting too,
Yeah.
globe trotting. And Vanessa is working on a book about art history from a psychoanalytical Lacanian point of view,
Hmm.
which is very interesting. And then it never ends. It's not over till it's over. So we're just going to be very disciplined and keep working on all these things, and it's going to be great. Yeah.
Real quick, where is the premiere for the film in November?
The premiere of the La Vey film will be in Copenhagen
Oh, cool.
because I have a friend there. He runs his own little cinema, and but of course there will be American screenings too. It's just that I need to finish that film when I'm home. I'm in the U.S. right now, but home is Stockholm in Sweden, so
Right.
that's where I'm going to wrap it up during the month of October, basically, and then start some promotion and hopefully as many screenings as possible. So anything that you know or other people know, if you know someone with a cinema or a capacity to arrange screenings, feel free to get in touch
I
because I
will. Yeah.
want it to be widely seen, and I think it's a topic and a person who people are very interested in, curious about.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to it. I'm a big fan of trap art. Big fan of both you and Vanessa's work. And thank you so much for showing me the time and being accommodating. And
Yeah,
let's
thank you.
not have this be the last time.
No, no, no. It won't be the last time. And I'm so in favor of what you're doing also. And Vanessa says hi. And it's just one great, beautiful, magical party on the internet and in real life and everything. So just keep up the good work and we'll talk soon again.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Carl, and hello, Vanessa. Have a
Yeah.
good one.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yep. Thanks. Bye. Bye.
That was my just incredible introductory conversation with Carl Abrahamsson. I implore him to come back because it's always good to get these initial introductory episodes out of the way when you first meet someone that you admire, you first meet someone that has really helped kind of shape your viewpoint about things that mean so much to you. It's nice to have them reoccur so that the bubble has popped. We can get on to the finer details with things. And that said, a special surprise, next episode, I will be having Mr. Mitch Horowitz back on the program to talk specifically about Satan himself and to touch a bit about depression and metaphysics, a confluence that I care very deeply about, as I have used metaphysics to help, how would I put this, to construct or to calibrate my intention as both a human and as an artist and as a magician. And I put air quotes in that for those listening. Um, so if you have any questions for Mitch Horowitz concerning the great adversary himself, Lucifer, please Twitter me. Handle is at pragmagic_cast. You can become a patron find unedited episodes and lots of other goodies, music, records, zines at patreon.com/pragmagic. And as always, haunt on. Beautiful, Boo.